It's such a beautiful day outside. And yes, I dearly hope that whenever you're listening to this, that it feels beautiful for you too, whatever the season you're in, whatever the weather you're in. And I was going to record this episode sitting outside, but there's a very welcome and quite strong breeze. So you'd have got lots of, sort of muffled noises over the mic, and it might not have been that easy to listen to. Welcome to the Henny podcast, the space for deepening self-awareness with profound self-compassion. I'm Henny. I write, coach and speak about how exploring our inner world can transform how we experience our outer world, all founded on a bedrock of self-love. Settle in and listen and see where the episode takes you. I've come back into the stable, but I am sitting on a day bed that I have in here, and I'm looking out of the window, and the door behind me is open, but you might hear the little beads that are hanging over it, stopping the insects from coming in, rattling a little bit. So yeah, just to kind of set the scene of where I am, and I'm looking out into our fields or our grass meadows as they're slowly becoming. And the sun is shining and the sky is very blue. And yeah, it feels really, I feel a lot of gratitude for being able to be here now. And I was thinking about what to share, the reflections to share today. And if you're part of the mailing list or you're with me on Instagram, then you'll know that right now I'm in the process of opening something very special. And it's called The Field. And it is a place, an online space for people who are navigating change, whatever kind of change they're in, wherever they are in their change process, whether they're right at the beginning or deep in that messy bit in the middle, or the bit that can feel messy in the middle, or if they're in the tail, the tail of the change. So it's a space where people can gather wisdom and maybe share and maybe rest, maybe recognize how far they've come, maybe acknowledge the steps that they've already taken, and maybe have space enough to pause enough to be able to see what steps would most serve them now as they move forward. And this is a space that has been, sitting quietly in my heart for a very long time. And I've really sat with how to phrase it, how to name what kind of space it is, to really sink deep into what it is that's been calling me to create and to offer this space out into the world. And so when I was thinking about, what to share with you today, that's obviously a huge part of it. And do you know what? I'm actually going to, all I can hear is the bees rattling. Bees? The beads rattling. So I'm going to pause briefly and come back to you. Okay, so I've taken the beads down and closed the door, and hopefully that won't be so distracting if you could hear it even. So I was thinking, what do I come and talk about today? Because, the field is really, literally in this moment, front and center. I'm looking out at a field. but it's really present within me right now. And so then I was thinking, you can find out about the field. I'll share the link for you. Um, and if you're curious to hear what we talked about last night at the opening event, I'm recording this on Friday, and last night on Thursday, we opened the field. I was joined by a really wonderful group of people who, wanted to come and hear more about it. And we also did a really wonderful practice, which I'll talk a little bit about in a moment. But if you would like to sort of hear what we covered in that session, then I'll share a link to that as well. So you can listen in. Maybe it will feel like an extra bonus episode of the podcast for you. And one of the things that we covered actually yesterday was a really wonderful practice which can help us see where we are in our process of change. So, I said just now about, we can be in many different places in our process of change. We might be right at the beginning, just dipping our toes into the water, or in the analogy I shared in the session last night, putting our foot onto the bridge of change. We might be standing right in the middle of that bridge, looking down at shallow water, running by quietly, or maybe it feels much more turbulent than that. Or we might be at the far end of the bridge, stepping into the new beginning that we've shaped or created or been part of in some way, or are part of in some way. And so in the practice that I shared, we actually somatically, embodied the experience of how does it feel, and how can you recognize where you are when you tap into those feelings, in terms of being on that bridge of change. And it's a really powerful practice. And if you're curious about doing your own exploration of change, then you might really enjoy that. It's about halfway through the session last night. So you can hear about the field and you can do the practice. So that's all there, you can, and I can share a link to the field, and it would be wonderful to have you join me there. But I also wanted to talk about how sharing this, how nurturing this idea, crafting this idea, and getting out of my own way in order to share this idea into the world has been a practice, a lived experience practice in the work that I support others in doing. And, intellectually, I understand that, of course. But it was interesting. It was only really today that that kind of understanding sank deeper into my body, and it was like, oh gosh, yeah, I really have gone through all the different sort of phases of doubt and fear and confusion and optimism and hope and doubt and fear and confusion. We go through these, don't we, in these kind of ever repeating sort of spirals as we move toward creating something new in our life. And I just wanted to name that, and to name it as much for myself, but also to say, regardless of our experience, or regardless of the knowledge that we've gathered, we are all human, and we all are going through these processes of change all the time. And the thing that shifts, the thing that I see that shifts, is the way that we hold space for ourselves as we navigate it. Now, the idea for the field first came to me maybe 5 or 6 years ago. I didn't call it that. I didn't have a sort of clear kind of concept of what it was, but the root of it, the like feeling deep in my belly, that landed in me a long time ago. And what I have allowed it to do is to percolate and to sort of ferment and to, sort of go into that gloopy goo of the butterfly inside the chrysalis, or the caterpillar inside the chrysalis, before it emerges as the butterfly, like allowing something to sit in that dark, gloopy place and form itself in a way is very different from what I would have done in the past, 10, 20 years ago. I'd have really pushed at it. I'd have, wanted to birth it as fast as I could. I'd have wanted, in the analogy of the bridge, I'd have wanted to get from one side of the bridge to the other in the quickest possible way, ideally without actually having to cross over the bridge. And sort of go through all of the steps that it takes to move through that change. And if I had, done this, then the end result, the sort of thing that got created, might have still had many aspects to it that were worthy and useful and very valid, but my feeling about myself and what I'd created would have been very different. And I don't know if any of this is resonating with you. It's kind of, this is one of those episodes where I'm kind of through sharing with you, I'm kind of making sense of something to myself, really. But what I recognize this time is that through almost like the discipline of allowing myself to sit with the discomfort of not pushing and not pulling at an idea, but letting it just percolate and ferment and, do its thing. That feels to me like a much more mature response than the one that I might have had in the past, which is not to say that, as I've got closer to launching the field, there hasn't been a lot of work, because there has. I've had to find a whole new platform, invest in that and create that space for people to be able to come into sort of community with each other in a safe environment. I've had to do an awful lot of thinking about the language that I use and the technology that I use and the systems and the all of the kind of like the detail stuff. That's all been a lot of work. And my senses that I've held space for myself through that complexity in a way that I'm really proud of, actually. That's what's coming up right now. And it's further evidence to me of the power and the significance of these two unifying factors, which I think underpin all deep and lasting change. And one is self-awareness, and the other one is self-compassion. And the combination of those two things is what I call compassionate self-enquiry. This willingness to be with ourselves even when something feels immensely difficult, and the willingness to be with the pain of something or the suffering that has come out of the pain of something, and to attend to what it is that the part of us that is feeling the pain, or the part of us that is feeling the suffering, to attend to those parts and really, really look after them, in order to then be able to understand, oh my darling, how are we then going to move forward? So a really concrete example of this is back in March this year, sort of mid-March, I had a lovely few days away on the coast in Pembrokeshire. And I think that I had this sort of idea that by the time I got back from my holiday, I would have all of the answers for the field that I hadn't yet managed to work out. And of course, that didn't happen, because for whatever reason, it just didn't. And so what I was left with was a sense of frustration, a sense of I should have been working harder at it. I shouldn't have taken that time off. I should have. And noticing that and being with that meant that I could turn toward those parts and say, oh, what is it that you need? And so the part that was saying, oh, I should have worked harder, I was able to have a conversation really with that part and understand, where does that story come from about, that it's only hard work, I'm putting inverted commas around that word, that gets you to the outcome that you want to get to. Because meanwhile, while all of those shoulds were rising, deep underneath them, I was actually working out the answers to the questions that I'd posed to myself. And by the time I returned home from that trip, I knew exactly how the field was shaped and how to share it. And so it's like these two things were happening simultaneously. One, the kind of like, oh, I don't know what I'm doing. And then underneath that, the wiser part of me working it all out for me. Now, if I'd got stuck in the headspace of, I don't know what I'm doing, this is too hard, other people are good at these things, not me, all of these stories that we can hold, I certainly can hold. If I got sort of stuck up there, up in the head, I may not have been able to also allow the freedom for my wiser, calmer, kinder, clearer self to work things through in her own way. However, by attending to the parts that were feeling the anxiety or the doubt or the fear, by attending to them with kindness, by not beating myself up for, not working hard enough, by not beating myself up for not having worked it all out yet, or doing the other thing, which I really nearly did, which was I nearly scrapped the whole thing, or that was one option. And then another option that came to me was, well, I could always move it to September, move the launch to September. So, all of these parts are all speaking, they're all desperately trying to look after me. And in and amongst it all was self. The part that, if you listen to the conversation with Sula last week, then you'll have, sort of hopefully a sort of clearer understanding of this sense of parts work, and self being the container that holds all of our parts, and it's self who has this this kind of rooted, grounded quality, and this compassionate curiosity and courageousness, that when we're really sort of standing in self, that's when we feel most aligned. And it's when we're kind of lost in pain or doubt or fear, uncertainty, or sort of hyper expectation of things, or sort of lost in kind of imagination of how something could be, but it's not rooted in reality. All of those parts that hold those different ways of thinking and being, when we're lost in one of those, that's when sort of life can feel quite challenging, or very challenging, extremely challenging for us. And so being able to stand in self and observe those parts and attend to them can be, one of the most beautiful things that we can do for ourselves. And so I really hope that all made sense. And so this is sort of my reflection, really, is that is the process that I've taken myself through as I've been creating the field. And so this is life imitating art, or art imitating life. It's a direct embodiment of, the purpose of the field, which is to be a place where people can come when stuff is feeling messy in life, and find a place to pause, and a place to maybe gather some wisdom that could really support them on their journey through whatever change it is that they're making. And the only sort of ask of any of us in this space is to come with curiosity. And that's really the compassionate self-enquiry, the curiosity about, like, oh, what is it that I'm experiencing right now? And how can I hold space for myself and for others who are doing their work while I do my own work too? I feel this so deeply, that our nervous systems need places where we can rest. And when I say rest, I don't mean become inactive. I mean rest, and through that rest actually become maybe even more productive. And it's such counterintuitism, because so many of us, we're brought up in this environment that says that productivity is all about things feeling hard and effortful. And I really want to challenge that. And I also want to challenge this idea that, we have to do things on our own. And that there's another sort of principle here, which is that I want to challenge the idea that other people have got better answers than us. Because my premise is that we all innately hold all of the wisdom that we need. It's just that sometimes it can be so valuable to listen and to observe others, and to be able to sort of see through our observation, through this witnessing of others, be able to see, oh, maybe there's another path for me too. Maybe there's another way through this thing that I'm experiencing right now. And this work with the nervous system, it's something that I've been running some retreats with the lovely Grace, and we've actually got another one-day retreat coming up in May, so I'll put that into the notes. It's an online day, so if you're not local to me, you can come along to that. And it's a day of exploring the nervous system and really understanding it from the perspective of polyvagal theory. So if you love a bit of science, we'll be sharing that. But more importantly, it's about the kind of, again, the embodied experience of what does it feel like when our nervous system is out of kilter, and what does it feel like when we're back online and we're really anchored within ourselves. And these two things, parts work and polyvagal theory, they sit together so beautifully, because we all know how it feels when we feel good within ourselves. We all know how it feels when we're taking an action that feels like, oh yeah, that is the right action for me right now. And we also know how it feels when something's happening that feels wrong, that just feels off, that feels not okay. And so much of this work that to me feels so important, and one of the reasons for creating the field is in order for us to have a safe enough space where we can really practice and learn how to listen in to our nervous systems and feel into the deep okay and the deep not okay. What we sometimes call the deep yes and the deep no. So I think that might be it for today. Other than to say, if any of this has resonated with you, if anything about the field has resonated with you and you want to find out more, please do look at the link. It's my normal website, hennyflynn.co.uk, and then enter the field, enter the field. But I'll put the link in the notes. And, I would love to see you there. And it's also a place where you don't have to perform. You don't have to, there's no judgment, there's no comparison. This is really the intention within it, is that we recognize that what someone else is working on is theirs, and what we are working on is ours. And we hold space for each other together to allow that work to happen. So if that calls to you, oh my goodness me, I would be so delighted to see you. It all begins from the 1st of May. And we have monthly gatherings. And I also share prompts and other, maybe like bits of research around the themes that we're looking at. And our first season, which runs May, June, July this year, our first season is all about standing in your own space. And, we look at the areas of self-expression, one of the most vital things for our mental health and our physical health as well, actually. We look at boundaries, how often has someone crossed over a boundary, or have you realized you hadn't set a boundary, or do you realize that you'd crossed over your own boundary? And then we also look at the thing that I've come to call the vulnerability boomerang, this thing that can happen when we step outside of our conditioned norms, and then we go, oh my goodness me, I feel so raw. This is so hard. And I've been really mindful of the potential of me experiencing a vulnerability boomerang with the field, because I've birthed this thing. It's really important to me. There's strong emotion for me as I think about this space and why it feels so important, particularly right now in all of the chaos that we're experiencing in the outer world. And, that could be very vulnerable. It could be so vulnerable that there's a vulnerability boomerang that comes back and hits me and makes me want to retreat and hide and, tell people, I'm so sorry, I didn't really mean it. I haven't actually opened the field at all. But that hasn't appeared. And I'm now going to add the word yet, because, it might show up. And then it's about, how do I look after myself if that happens? So, these are all things that are relevant, whatever kind of change we're going through. And, if you are experiencing change in whatever way, whether that's, life stage change, so something like menopause, or to do with your work changing, or to do with a relationship, or it's something that you want to change within you, maybe you notice there's some limiting beliefs that are holding you back, or there's a mindset that is maybe too rigid and you want to soften that in order to be able to expand more fully into the space that is available to you. Or maybe there's some habits or behaviors that you wish to change, or that you are changing. All of these things, they're all welcome in the field. You are so welcome in the field. And there's a Rumi quote that I've been sharing as I talk about this, and It's interesting because the name, the field, emerged so organically and on so many levels. There are so many metaphors that arise for me when I think about it. But also, one of my favourite Rumi quotes is, "Out beyond ideas of wrongdoing and right doing, there is a field. I'll meet you there." And I would love to meet you in the field if it calls you. I think there was another point I was going to make to close, but that's drifted away out into the blue, blue sky. And so I'm going to close here. Oh, other than to say that was it. If something else about this resonates with you, about maybe, some experience that you're having right now, and, what I shared about what I've gone through as I've nurtured and fermented, the idea of the field. Maybe something about that resonates with you, and it can just be really interesting to turn toward, if there's a fear or a doubt or a uncertainty or an excitement about what you're doing. It can be really interesting to turn toward that part, whether you have a visual sense of that part or a felt sense of that part, or you could write in your journal, "Dear part, dear excitement, dear hope, dear fear." And, sort of ask them what it is that they need, and listen to what response you get. And if that all sounds like, how on earth would you do that? Then my guidance would be, give it a go. And if you want to know more about that way of working, then we'll also be talking a little bit about that at various points in the field. But you can also come and work with me one-to-one if that feels like more your thing. So, and then the last thing really is that there's no requirements on anybody in the field. I always say that when people come here work, on solo retreat to Batchbrook, this is the land of no requirements, and that feels so important to me because we are bombarded by alerts and things that are trying to take our attention all of the time, and the intention for the field is that it is deliberately spacious. And if you don't want to speak and you don't want to share, you just want to listen, that is absolutely okay. It is absolutely okay to show up just as you are and in the right way for you, because you're the only person who knows what's right for you. Deep down, we all do. And sometimes the work can be, how do I listen? How do I listen more deeply? I think, that's definitely something I've sat with for a long time, is really asking my wisest, kindest self, how do I do that? Anyway, there we go. I said I was going to end and then I didn't, and then I said I was going to end and then I didn't, but this time I definitely am. And I am so grateful that you are here, and so grateful that you allowed me to share all of that. This is the work, of course, and I want to send you so much love. Take a look at the links, and I send you a hug and a wave.